When I was younger, I went through a phase of being very into Ouija boards. I was often fascinated by the supernatural and was quite frankly disappointed that nothing had ever happened to me. That changed during a sleepover that I attended in 3rd grade. Myself, along with 5 or so other girls from my class, were staying the night at the house of another classmate of ours. Nothing of significance happened until later after her parents had gone to bed. We had played light as a feather, stiff as a board, and Bloody Mary. To no avail, so we had essentially given up on our mission to make contact with beyond. Until one of the girls, who was my best friend at the time, smiled and pulled something out of her bag. It was a Ouija board. The host of the sleepover was instantly really upset and demanded that it be taken out of the house. We asked her why she was so mad about it, but she didn't really have a reason. She just insisted that we put it away or else her mom would freak out. Her mom was really religious, so we just assumed that it was a superstitious thing. The girl whose board it was would not accept that as a valid reason to stop, so we started to play. No one except me, the girl who the board belonged to, and the sleepover host really believed. We had asked several questions, and while the pointer did move, they attributed it to be near my best friend moving it. They say that the pointer moves because someone playing is subconsciously moving it. That could have been true, so we decided to ask a question that I knew for sure I only knew the answer to. I intentionally did not put my hand on the piece to try and prove a point, and the piece started moving immediately. It had spelled 3 correct letters when my friend's mom came into the room. I'll never forget the expression on her face. It was one of pure terror and absolute disgust. I went to school with this girl and was one of her best friends from ages 5 to 13. I knew her mother very well, and never before then, or since then, have I seen her so profoundly upset. She was so livid that she actually called everyone's parents at 2 a.m., insisting that they come pick us up. Ouija boards usually have some sort of sun, moon, some other contradicting nature type things in the top corners. The one we played with had an open eye in the left upper corner and a closed eye on the right. When we went back to pack up our stuff, we noticed that it had moved from the letter we had left it on, and it was solidly over the open eye. My friends and I looked at each other and decided it would be best not to share that with anyone else, so as to not cause unnecessary panic. When school started on the next Monday, we all ran up to the host asking what the hell had happened and why her mom got so upset. She was visibly shaken and did not want to talk about it. After being goaded all day by everyone who had attended the sleepover, she finally cracked. The story went that when her mom was in high school, she had this group of friends that she hung around with pretty much constantly. 2 members of their group were dating. One day when they were juniors, they decided to play with the Ouija board. They also decided to ask the one question that you're not supposed to ask. When am I going to die? One by one, they took turns asking this, and the board gave them all the answers. Curiously, the couple both got the same date. For a while, everyone kept the dates in the back of their minds, but as the years went on with no deaths, they lost their impact. The couple stayed together throughout college, and one weekend, the boyfriend took his girlfriend on a trip with the intention of proposing to her. They were both murdered. A murder that has gone unsolved, on the day that the board had predicted that they would both die. Now, I have no way of verifying the authenticity of her story, but based on the reaction of my friend's mom and the manner with which my friend retold the story to us, I have no doubts in my mind that it is true. Now, it has been 15 years since this happened, and nothing has happened in regards to the board resting on the open eye, but I now refuse to participate in Ouija boards, and I strongly urge anyone who expresses interest not to as well. During July of 2011, my friends and I decided to go on a camping trip to Vancouver, British Columbia during our final summer break before senior year. We stayed at Garibaldi Provincial Park because my friends and I live about 20 minutes away in case we needed anything. We are not really experienced when it comes to the outdoors, being high school kids in the suburbs of Mississauga, so this convinced my parents to let me go. About a week before we left, one of my friends, Daniel, brought up that he found his grandmother's old Ouija board in his attic. When he was living in Ecuador, he had always been told to steer clear of it, but after she had passed away, he completely forgot about it. Obviously, being the ignorant, rebellious 17-year-olds that we were, we decided to take it with us. None of us really believed in it, aside from Daniel, who was told stories by his grandmother as a child, but even then, he was curious to see if they were true. So the week finally passed by and we left for our trip. We safely arrived at my friend's aunt's house and gathered everything we needed to spend the night in the forest. The day passed by pretty quickly and mostly consisted of us putting up the tent and setting up our campsite. Once the sun went down, we decided to light a fire and roast hot dogs. Just when we were about to pass out from exhaustion, Daniel brought up the Ouija board, and there was no way we were going to leave without doing it. Little side note, this was not one of those plastic Hasbro boards you find at a nearby Toys R Us. This was about 50 or 60 years old, from a small town in Ecuador, probably made by Satan himself by the looks of it. I'm not sure how well the manufactured ones work, but just to be safe, I'd avoid those at all costs as well. So the five of us huddled around a circle alongside the dying fire. Daniel said a prayer of some sort in Spanish before we started, and to be honest, I nearly shit myself, because I thought he was possessed already. Then he explained to me that his grandmother told him to pray beforehand to avoid evil spirits. Still not knowing what we were doing, we figured the best way to begin was to ask a question. So everyone put 2 fingers on a leaf we found on the ground to use as a planchette, since Daniel said he couldn't find the original. We decided to ask some stupid questions like, how small is Daniel's dick? Naturally, we didn't get a response and just figured the whole Ouija board thing was a hoax. Then we decided to ask the most basic question. Is anybody there? Suddenly our arm started to move the leaf, spelling out the name. Vual. I of course freaked the fuck out, as did my friend Celine, whose aunt was the one living nearby. Let me tell you, at that point we should have stopped, but hey, it actually worked, so why not finish what we started? We continued to ask questions, mainly about Vual and his background, from which we didn't get more than a phrase in a different language. I don't know how to pronounce it or what it meant. Every time we asked anything related to the demon. After a few failed attempts to get to know our company, we decided to steer the questions back to us. Sitting across from me, Patrick asked, which one of us won't graduate, jokingly. Our hands spell out, Daniel and Celine. We all laughed, since Daniel was one of the smartest people I know, and Celine's mother would ship her to a boarding school in a heartbeat. But there was the slightest inkling of suspicion that her youngest daughter wasn't attending university. We then asked a few more questions about our personal lives and decided to call it a night. We said our goodbyes and went inside the tents. At around 4 a.m. that night, I woke up for some unknown reason. As I was about to roll over to my side and fall back asleep, my friend Clara, whom I was sharing the tent with, asked why I was breathing so heavily. I wasn't. We stayed up for the rest of the night trying to figure out the source of the noise, too afraid to check outside. I suggested that it was probably some animal, but she swore she felt the breath down her neck. The next morning, we asked others about it, and nobody said they heard anything, so we just brushed it off as a too vivid nightmare. And after packing up all of our stuff, made our way back to Celine's aunt's house. The rest of the summer passed by uneventfully, and by the time the school year started, we had almost all but forgotten about that night. As the weeks rolled on, Daniel became pretty distant from all of us. We'd been talking less and less throughout the summer, but I figured he was trying to make the most of his then full-time job in order to save money for university. However, it got worse during the school year, and I then thought, maybe he's just stressing about homework and extracurriculars. I tried reaching out to him once in a while, but he never answered his phone. When I saw him at school, he looked as if he hadn't eaten or slept since the Cold War. Then one night, I got a phone call from Clara. She was late to pick me up, because the highway had been closed, and driving by Daniel's house, she noticed 2 police cars parked outside. We drove by his house later that night, but the cars were gone, and of course, he didn't answer his phone. So we figured we'd just corner him at school tomorrow and ask what happened. However, he didn't show up the next morning, and neither did Celine. It wasn't until that evening that I found out what happened. Daniel had stabbed Celine 17 times and dumped her body in a river near the school, and shortly after disappeared. When they found Celine's body, she had the words of the phrase that the demon had us spell out, engraved down her left arm. This story is about an experience I had using a Ouija board when I was in 7th grade. I'm 28 now, so it was quite a while ago. I don't remember some of the smaller details anymore, but everything I'm writing actually happened, and this story is 100% true. I'm the kind of person who would probably never have believed in anything paranormal, unless I experienced it for myself, so in a way I'm glad that this happened to me when it did, as it opened my eyes when I was still young. This all happened at my friend Mark's house. It was on a weekend. Me and 3 of my friends had been hanging out at Mark's house all afternoon. Mark's parents were going out all night, and they had a rule that no friends were allowed over when they weren't there, so we were all getting ready to leave. Mark's parents were both doctors and insanely strict. He used to get grounded for weeks at a time for the most ridiculous reasons. I remember him getting grounded one time for one of his friends calling his house during dinner time. Needless to say, we were all pretty surprised when his mom came upstairs and told us that we could all stay over there that night, as long as we were good. In those days, having a house free of parents was a huge deal, and we were all really excited. Before I go on, let me explain the layout of the house real quick. It's a nice neighborhood, but the lots aren't that huge. A typical garage would take up most of the width of the house. The houses are long. His house had a garage in the front. There was a walkway along the side of the house that leads to the front door, which was in the center of the house. When you walk in, there's a small guest bedroom to your left, and the entrance to the garage at the far end of the left wall. To your right, there is a large open family room with huge vaulted ceilings. At the far end of the family room was the entrance to the kitchen and dining room area at the back of the house. Directly across from you is a wraparound staircase leading upstairs. Upstairs basically consisted of 2 bedrooms in the far end of the house and a master bedroom above the garage. They were connected by a walkway that overlooked the entire family room and entranceway. Directly above the entranceway was a small game room which has no doors and connected to the walkway right before the master bedroom. So anyways, after his parents left, a few of us ran home real quick to get a few things. We all lived pretty close and could skateboard from home, about 5 minutes. When everyone returned, one of my friends had brought a Ouija board he got a couple weeks before. We had used it one time before, but were eager to try it out again. We went upstairs to the game room to set it up, while Mark locked up the house and turned off all the lights downstairs. When everything was all set up, the house was completely dark, except for the dim ceiling fan light we had on so we could see. I honestly can't remember the specific questions we asked for the responses we got, but I do remember 2 brief interactions that went to goodbye before this got weird. By this time, we were all pretty into it, and the questions were more provocative. I distinctly remember immediately feeling that this one was more intense than the previous times, and I was getting kind of nervous. The responses weren't the kind that a typical 7th grader could come up with, even if they were controlling it, which is basically what I assumed the Ouija board was up until this point. Questions that could be answered with yes or no would be spelled out, and the responses were more menacing than before. Everyone there was getting scared. You could see it in their faces, but nobody wanted to act scared. Then my friend Brad, who had been asking most of the questions, blurts out, "Prove it, do something." There was a few seconds of pure silence. Any sound whatsoever would have probably scared us to death. Just as I was starting to feel relief, there was a gut-wrenching shriek from the cat downstairs. Directly below us, followed immediately by the sound of shattering glass on the tiled floor. I can't explain the fear I had at that moment. Everything was blurred for a moment. The next thing I remember, we were all huddled up in the back of the game room. All you could see outside the room past the walkway was the top half of the stairway leading upstairs from the entryway. We watched those stairs for what seemed like 15 minutes without saying a word. At some point, we decided we had to go check out what happened. We all grabbed whatever makeshift weapons we could find. I think I had a pencil, and slowly made our way downstairs as a group. When we got around the corner of the staircase, the first thing I saw was the cat. It was still hissing, back arched, and scared to death. It was on the top of a cabinet about 10 feet from the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a giant puddle of water and shattered glass. It was one of those snow globes, the ones that are about the size of a small watermelon and weigh easily 10 to 20 pounds. As soon as we realized what it was, then it hit everyone that this very large, heavy snow globe had been on the cabinet where the cat was standing, 10 feet away from where it was smashed on the floor. Before this could even sink in, music suddenly started playing in the kitchen behind us. At this point, I'm literally so scared that I'm numb. We all ran into the kitchen and turned on the lights. In the middle of the counter, in the middle of the kitchen, is one of those Santa Claus toys that shuffles around and sings a song when you turn it on. Mark runs up, grabs it and starts flickering the power switch, trying to turn it off. It wouldn't turn off. He frantically hits it against the counter, and when it still wouldn't turn off, he threw it as hard as he could on the ground. I know this probably sounds ridiculous, but when the toy broke, the battery cover flew off and the toy had no batteries. The next thing I know, we're all upstairs in Mark's room, door locked and praying. Nothing else happened after that, but needless to say, Mark got grounded when his parents came home to that mess. He then got grounded for twice as long for lying about what happened. In a way, I'm glad I experienced this, but there is no way I would ever use a Ouija board again in my life.